Hi, this is Eric Martin with BoardGameGeek. Before we get to today's game, hold up the empty box for now, I want to talk about an article written by designer Seth Jaffe in January of 2015 for the League of Game Makers website, where he talks about good and bad play experiences and a designer's responsibility for those experiences. Should a designer accept that some people are going to have a bad playing experience? Jaffe related a few of his concerns along those lines. He gave examples talking about Terra Prime, one of his early releases, about how bad experiences there through the player's own fault, despite being warned not to do certain things. The player did certain things anyway and was effectively eliminated from the game early. Okay, so Jaffe changed the nature of the game in order to prevent that. And he even goes further, talking in the article about how he can't stand the thought that someone, even through their own fault, will have a bad play experience. For him, that's unacceptable. Not something he wants to allow. Which brings us to Hot Tin Roof, a game by Leo Colavini and Mayfair Games, released in 2015. How does this work? Here are the components for Hot Tin Roof, which most prominently features a game board that shows a number of rooftops, each of which has a name, and they go from A to P. These rooftops are connected by a broken network of gutter, pipes, ladders, aerials, all sorts of things. Okay, you get the sense. It's a broken network, and you're going to have to complete that network in order to do things. Now, these names are on tiles, which are next to action spaces on the board. You have a huge stack of tiles, very thick tiles here, and they are next to 3 action spaces. You've got 2 other action spaces for catwalk and shelter. Each player starts with 2 pairs of cats. You've got some catwalk tiles, you've got shelters, and you have cans of food which function as currency in the game. You also have some fish on the side. Each fish counts as 10 cans of food, and you start with 12 or 14 depending on the number of players. On a turn, you're going to do 2 things. First, you must pay 1 can of food to each of the 5 action spaces. If you cannot do this, you take 2 cans of food from the bank and your turn ends. You don't do anything else, and you are very sad. Do not do this. Second thing you do is you choose one of the 5 action spaces and you do whatever action is associated with it. You take all the cans of food from that space and now you take it. So if I do this on the catwalk, I'm going to place one of my catwalks somewhere on the board, covering an empty space. If they're all placed on the board, I can move one that already exists. If I take the shelter action, I place one of my shelters on the board on a rooftop that doesn't currently have a shelter. If I take one of these tiles, again, I take all the cans of food on it. You need that food in order to pay for actions in the future. And I place 1 cat on each of these depicted rooftops, the Dontonvilles and the Finlands. And the names, by the way, relate to past and present Mayfair employees, just as a nice in-joke. Okay. I place these cats. Well, now what? Cats can't move because the network is broken. They have nothing to walk across in order to meet each other, and meeting each other is what they desire to do. So in future actions, perhaps I'll take more catwalks, perhaps someone else will put in a catwalk, and at any point at the end of my turn, after doing my action, I can move cats across existing catwalks in order to try to connect them. If I cross over someone else's catwalk, I have to pay them 1 can of food. And if I can't pay them, then I cannot move. If you move into someone else's shelter, for example, if this guy moved into here, he has to pay me 2 cans of food. And again, if he can't go here. If he starts there and I build a shelter around him, he doesn't pay anything because he just walks out the door freely. Okay. We're going to keep taking actions. Pay your 5 cans of food, take one of these actions. Pay 5, take an action. And so on. We keep going until all these fish are gone. The game ends immediately. Well, at the end of the turn that the final one is taken, we then see who has the most cans of food, with each fish counting as 10 cans of food, and whoever has the most food wins. And that's it for Hot Tin Roof, which I played 11 times now on a press copy from Mayfair Games. But an overview of the game play, the actual mechanisms of it, doesn't really give you a feel for the game. Now, I've played a lot of Colavini games in my time. I'm a huge fan of his style of design, as, for example, with Cartagena, which I played 400 times online, several dozen times offline as well. Clans, another good one, very bare bones rules. Alexandros, a little more involved. I know a lot of people are not big fans of this, but I've liked it a lot. Even Submarine. Poor maligned Submarine. Enjoy that one as well. There's Atlantis, which Amigo published earlier in relation with Amigo Spiele. There's also Flea Market, another recent Mayfair Colavini production. They all share things in common, right? It sort of ties back to what is the nature of a Colavini design. Now, if you go back to the early 2000s, we didn't talk about Euro games. We talked about German games, right? Now, Colavini is an Italian designer, but he is a designer of German-style games, the way that we understood them in the early 2000s. Right? There's no player elimination. There's usually a lack of downtime. You're talking about 45 to 60 minute playing time. But a more important aspect is that everyone's sort of centrally involved in the game play. Now you go to Agricola in 2007, and it really changed the nature of game design. It presented this new design. You know, people didn't know what to make of it. But a big part of Agricola is that you've got your own sandbox for the most part. You have player interaction. You're competing for spaces. You're competing for resources on this central board, right? It's not multiplayer solitaire. I'm not making any accusations along those lines, because there is interaction, there's competition for all that, and that has spawned just tons of games along those lines. A lot from Uwe Rosenberg and many other people as well, okay? That's a Euro game, the way that I think of it, right? That's sort of how it's branched off of this German game to the Euro game market. Colavini is a straight German game designer. He designs stuff, very bare bones rules, right? You go for the rules of Cartagena, and it's this little sheet of paper with half of this being like examples of play and background. They're very bare bones, very simple systems that create interaction among the players. Right? Now, a fundamental aspect of Colavini designs is that you can kill yourself easily, all the time, in almost all of his games. Right? I've played a lot more than what I've shown here, and that's just something that comes up again and again. You play with new people in Cartagena, and people will just run themselves out of cards, and then they don't know what to do. And oh yeah, I got to move backwards to get cards, but they'll move back and get one, and then they'll use that one. They'll move back and they're not grasping the nature of the game. Or in clans, they're going to put themselves out of contention as they start grouping things together. Alexandros is you're cutting off aspects of space, and you're essentially taking yourself out of scoring down the road. Or Masons, right? Hans im Glück design by Colavini. Same thing where people complain, it's the luck of the cards. I don't know what to do. It's just the die roll and the cards and blah, blah, blah. Well, you got to see that as a system, and you're building things up for the long term and blah, blah, blah. And you see the nature of the play where everyone is competing in this shared space. You are creating it together. You don't have your own individual nest that you are tending to and growing and getting points, sort of regardless what other people are doing. I'm going to take these actions, and this is all going to get me a whole nest egg of points, right? Thinking of Orléans, for example, which I just played recently. For the first time, I had no idea what I was doing. I chose what in retrospect was not really great strategy, just doing sort of random actions. But hey, I still got 109 points, okay? That seems like success compared to the winning score of 139, but I don't know. I mean, it's just mostly me on my own, doing my own thing. Versus Colavini, where you will go into the game and you could score nothing. You could just tank yourself completely and take yourself out of the game, as in Hot Tin Roofs, right? Again, I played this 11 times. So with 3 and 4 players, I got some experience on it. And you can definitely, they have that rule in there, you must pay 5, right? So you're going to spend 5 money each turn before you can take an action. If you don't, you have to take 2 and then sit out for your turn. And if you do that, you're effectively going to skip probably 2 or 3 turns before you can do anything, and other people race ahead. Another big aspect, if you get both pairs of cats on the board, well, then you can't take any of the tiles that would let you put cats on the board, because of course all your cats are on the board. But if you can't build the network of catwalks to connect those cats, you're not going to get them back, which means all you're doing is taking catwalk and shelter tiles, which other people are going to be taking as well, which means you're going to get very few food resources, which means you're probably going to have to go to the bank to get some, which means you've lost actions, which means you're probably toast. I had one game with a 3-player game. All 3 of us got in that spiral where we had to just take money from the bank, money from the bank, money from the bank. Eventually, I broke out first. I could do a catwalk. I could do it again, right, from money that had piled up on there. I connected my cat first, which let me take another cat tile, which just let me race away with the game, right? Because no one else could do anything. And once I broke out first, I could just keep taking that catwalk tile, preventing others from doing it, and bankrupting them so that they couldn't do anything else, right? Is that a bug or feature? I mean, that's the nature of a Calavini design, is that you can hamstring yourself and die. It's fundamental to his designs. And so that's part of Hot Tin Roof. And a lot of people, well, I don't know, some percentage of people will play a game like that, go into a death spiral. I don't see anything I'm supposed to do. Oh, I'm supposed to put my cats out. Okay, don't. Oh, I have no food. And it's just like this gaming apocalypse where, it just goes sour for them. It's not for them. Okay, it's a bad play experience. But that's what Calavini allows you to do. He gives you this little playground with a teeny set of rules, and then you go and explore. You interact with all these other players. And sometimes you make mistakes. Sometimes you learn from those mistakes, and you play again, and you learn what not to do. Okay? That's a type of design that I appreciate, right? It's that trust of the designer that I'm going to give you this space to play around in, and you'll see what happens, right? Maybe you will not do well. Maybe you will do extremely poorly. But ideally, you understand that it's not a one-shot experience, or at least it doesn't have to be, right? It doesn't have to be one and done, because you're going to go into this world and learn it, and ideally explore it again and again and again. So there's a run-through. I can't even get to the game now. All those Calavinis piled up around me. There's a run-through of Hot Tin Roof.